Hello, I'm Miriam Dow. You will be hearing my voice and seeing my hands while I work in front of you. Please use this cassette as you would use an instruction book. Go at your own pace, stopping whenever you need more time or wish to review something. I will be showing you the way I knit, which is not exclusively mine, nor the only way to knit. If you find it easier to hold the yarn and needles in a different manner, please do so. Be comfortable and relaxed while you watch and learn basic knitting. I am working with different colors of yarn so you can quickly identify your place on the tape. I am using size 10 knitting needles, and I suggest you work with large yarn and needles too, so you can see the stitches clearly. I will also be using several items that you may not be familiar with. This is a cable needle. Here is a crochet hook, a stitch holder, and on my safety pin I have put a small ring which will be used as a stitch marker. This is a row counter, and this is a knitting gauge. You will also need scissors and a tape measure. Please have your pattern sheet handy, and you may wish to have a pen and paper ready for taking notes as we go along. Now let's get started. To begin knitting, you must cast the stitches onto the needle, and to do this, you start with a slip knot. So pull out about 20 inches of yarn. Then you wrap the yarn around your fingers and tuck the underneath loop through and pull this loop up. This is your slip knot. I'll do it again. Wrap it around your fingers, tuck the underneath loop through, and pull this loop up. And this is the loop that you put onto the knitting needle. Now underneath, you can see that I have a triangle. I'm going to put the first two fingers of my left hand into the triangle, grab the rest of the yarn, open the thumb and first finger, and pull back, and I get something that looks like a slingshot. You will go under the front loop, over the back loop, pull it through, drop the thumb out, put it in underneath, and pull up on your needle. Not too tight, just make the stitches snug, and hold on to them with the first finger of your right hand. It's under the front loop, over the back loop, pull it through, drop the thumb out, and put it in underneath, under the front one, over the back one, come through, drop the thumb out, and pull up on your yarn. Now I'm going to start again. Here is the triangle. Thumb and first finger go through underneath, grab the rest of the yarn, and pull back till you get your slingshot. Now you go under the front one, over the back one, and come through, drop the thumb out, and pull up on your yarn. Under the front one, over the back one, and then pull up on your yarn. Under, over, and pull it through. Under, over, and through, and then pull it up. Under, over, and through, then pull it up. Under, over, and through, and pull it up. Under the front one, over the back one, pull it through, and then pull up on your yarn. Now I'm going to count my stitches. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. And if you will read the pattern for pattern number 1, garter stitch, it says to cast on 12 stitches. So we will have to put on 1 more. The triangle, fingers underneath, get the slingshot, and you go under and over and through. Now I'm going to cut off the tail on the short piece of yarn so that I do not confuse it with the yarn that is coming from my skein. Turn this needle around, and then you are ready to pick up the empty needle with your right hand. You are going to go in to the front loop on your needle, the front side of the first loop. Take the needle through, and then you can hold on to it with your left hand while I show you how I pick up the yarn to use it. It comes around my little finger, and then over my first finger, and then I'm ready to hold the empty needle in my right hand. Once you are into the stitch, the yarn comes around from underneath, then you slip this loop through and slip off the stitch. Then you go into the next stitch, wrap the yarn around the needle, pull it through underneath, and slip it off. In, around, pull it through, slip it off. In, around, pull it through, and slip it off. In, around, pull it through, 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 slip it off. Now when you get down to the end stitches, be very careful that you don't accidentally pull off both stitches at the same time. If you do, be sure you put this last stitch back onto your needle the same direction it came off so that you do not have a twisted stitch. Don't come around this way to get it. It goes back on the same way it came off, and then you can finish that row. And you have done 1 row of knitting. Now put this needle into your left hand so the empty needle is in your right hand. Now you must be careful of this first stitch, that you do not get the loop that is underneath the stitch. Be sure you go in to the loop that is coming across the needle. I'll pick up the yarn slowly again around my little finger and then over the first finger, and I'm ready to wrap the yarn, then pull it through underneath and slip it off. In, and I'm going from the front to the back, wrapping the needle and pulling it through. Now when you go in this stitch, be sure you go in far enough so that you can wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle and not just the tip. If you work down here, the stitch will be too tight. You must go in far enough to wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle. Then when you bring this through underneath, you must push that stitch up again onto the large part of the needle. This will keep your stitches even and your tension will be much better. Another thing to be careful of is to not splice into this yarn. Sometimes your needle will pick up only a portion of the stitch. This weakens the stitch and will have a funny looking bump on the outside of your work. You must go underneath and be sure you get the entire loop before you make the stitch. It's in, around, pull it through underneath, and slip it off. Remember to keep your work even. Wrap around the large part of the needle every time. Be careful again of your end stitches. Don't slip them off before you're ready for them. And now you have done 2 rows of knitting. This now goes into your left hand, and I'm going to show you how to put the stitches back on your needle if more than 1 or 2 have slipped off. You must be sure that the yarn comes from the right hand side, goes over the needle, and then continues to the left. If I open this stitch, I think you can see that's what happens. The yarn comes from my right, goes over the needle, and then continues to the left. So I must put these stitches back on, making sure that each one has the yarn coming from the right, going over the needle, and then continuing to the left. Now I have accidentally pulled out an extra row down here. So I'm going to put this back onto my needle, turn the work around, and do that last stitch again. Now I'm ready to start another row of knitting. Always watch your first stitch. Do not get the loop underneath. Get the one that goes across the needle. If you will notice, by looking down on the tip of the working needle, which is in your right hand, the yarn comes around this needle in a counterclockwise direction. In knitting, you go from the front to the back. The yarn goes around the needle in a counterclockwise direction. Then you pull it through underneath and slip it off. Now continue in garter stitch until this piece is 3 or 4 inches long. As you can see, there is no difference in the right or the wrong side of garter stitch. It is a very elastic stitch, stretching in all directions. Each one of these ridges going across your work represents 2 rows of knitting. Now I'm going to finish off this piece by binding off. You begin by working the first 2 stitches. Now with the tip of the left hand needle, pick up the stitch that is closest to your right thumb, and it comes up over the end of the needle and then drops off. You have bound off 1 stitch. Now you will work 1 more stitch, then pick up the one closest to your right thumb, and it comes up over and off of both needles. Be sure you are continuing to wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle, and be sure the stitch comes back up to the large part of your needle so that your cast-off row is not too tight. You work one stitch at a time, wrapping the yarn as you did before, then picking up the stitch closest to your right thumb and then binding it off. Just take each stitch as it comes, making sure that you do not pull up on your yarn. Remember to keep it loose so that your bind-off edge will be as elastic as the rest of your knitting. Now, when you have only one loop left on your right hand needle, you pull this up to a bigger loop and then cut off the tail and poke the end of the yarn through the loop. And now your work is finished off and your stitches are secure. Now please practice this stitch until it becomes easy for you before going on to the next part of the tape. Now that you have mastered the knit stitch, you are ready to go on to pattern number 2, stockinette stitch. If you will read the pattern, it says to cast on 12 stitches. So pull out about 20 inches of yarn, tie your slip knot, and then you can count the stitches as you put them on your needle. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now cut off your tail again so that you cannot confuse it with the yarn coming from your skein. Remember, these stitches now go into your left hand and you are ready to do row 1 of your pattern. And it says to knit 1 row. So we'll go into the first stitch and we'll make this row exactly like your first row on garter stitch. Making sure you go in far enough to wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle and that you push it through far enough so that the stitch comes up to the large part of the needle. Your yarn goes around the needle in a counterclockwise direction, and when you get down to the last stitch, be careful you don't slip it off before you have done the knit stitch into it. Now you have done 1 row of knitting. You turn your needles around, putting this into your left hand, and the empty needle will be into your right hand. Now you are ready to start row 2 of the pattern. And if you will read it with me, it says to purl 1 row. Purling is just the opposite from knitting. You are going to point the needle towards you instead of away from you. Be careful again of this first stitch that you do get into the loop that is over the needle and do not pick up the loop that is underneath. You are going to point the needle towards you and still wrap the working needle in a counterclockwise direction. Now you will pull this loop through underneath towards the back and then slip off the stitch. You come from the back to the front, wrap your yarn, push it through underneath, and then slip it off. You come in from the back to the front, wrap your yarn in a counterclockwise direction, push it through underneath, and then slip the stitch off. Remember to come in far enough to wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle, then push the stitch up to the large part before you slip it off. In, around, push it through underneath, and slip it off. In, around, push it through underneath, and slip it off. In, around, push it through underneath, and slip it off. In, around, push it through underneath, and slip it off. The yarn goes in a counterclockwise direction, and be careful that you do not splice into any stitches. Pick up the entire stitch. And now you have done 2 rows, 1 row of knitting and 1 row of purling. Turn this around and you can see that this side of your work is very flat and smooth, whereas the back side of your work, the purling side, is quite bumpy, more bumpy than your garter stitch was. And these are called purl nubs. Now if you will read your pattern again, it says to repeat these 2 rows. So you are beginning with row 1, which is the knit row. The flat side of your work is towards you. The purl nubs are on the back, and you will point your needle towards the purl nubs, which are now away from you, and wrap your stitch and pull it through underneath. In knitting, you go from the front to the back, pointing the needle towards the purl nubs. Always wrap in a counterclockwise direction. Stockinette stitch is one of the most common patterns used in knitted garments. I'm sure you've noticed how this flat, smooth stitch is what you see most often in sweaters. Many times, your pattern will merely say to work stockinette stitch for a certain number of rows or inches. Once the pattern has been set up, you alternate the knit and purl rows, knitting on the knit side, and then you will purl on the purl side, which has the purl nubs towards you now. Remember, you are going to point the needle towards these purl nubs. So on this row, the nubs are towards you, so you will point the needle towards you, and you are working a purl stitch. Always wrap in a counterclockwise direction regardless of whether it is a knit or a purl stitch. And be sure you push the needle in far enough on both sides so that you are wrapping the yarn around the large part of the needle where your stitches will be even and your tension will be even. Now work 3 or 4 inches on this piece before going on with the tape. I'm going to show you how to pick up a stitch that might have slipped off your needle and been pulled down a few rows. So I will pull this stitch down, and this is where you are going to use the crochet hook. Now you must find a complete open loop, even if you have to pull out one more row. Put the hook through this loop and then pick up the next strand and pull it through the loop. You work the stitch back, one strand at a time, making sure that you do not skip any strands or pull 2 through at the same time. Now once you have gotten this worked back to your needles, you must be sure that you put it onto your needle the correct way. The yarn must come from the right, go over the needle, and then continue to the left. So it must go on my knitting needle this way. Now these stitches have already been worked, so I'm merely going to slip them from one needle to the other. Now I'm going to show you how to count your rows in stockinette stitch. So you begin at the bottom with a complete row that goes up, and this first loop was the row where you cast on. You do not count this. Then working up, you can count each loop as you go towards the needle. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and the 16th row is on my needle. Now we'll bind this piece off as we did the garter stitch piece, working the first 2 stitches as before, then picking up the loop that is closest to your right thumb, and it goes up, over, and off. Pick up the one closest to your right thumb, and it goes up, over, and off. You work 1 stitch at a time, making sure you wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle and push the needle through far enough so that your tension will be the same on every stitch. Be careful again of your end stitches, that too many don't slip off. And when you have only 1 loop left, and it is on your right hand needle, you will pull it up, cut the yarn, poke the end through the loop, and your stitches are secure. Now practice on your stockinette stitch so you become familiar with the purl stitch before you go on with the next part of the tape. Ribbing. After reading the pattern, I cast on my 12 stitches, and now the pattern tells me to knit 2 stitches. So I will go in and knit the first 2 stitches. Now the pattern tells me to purl 2 stitches across the row, doing just these 2 things. But to change from knitting to purling in the middle of a row, I must bring the yarn between the needles and to the front of the work, so I'm ready to purl the next 2 stitches, still wrapping in a counterclockwise direction. Now I must go back and knit the next 2 stitches. But before I do that, I must take the yarn between the needles and to the back of my work. So when I point the needle towards the back, my yarn is there, so I can wrap it. These are the 2 knit stitches. Now to do the purl stitches, I bring the yarn between the needles and to the front, so I can point the needle towards me and wrap the yarn in the front of my work. Now to knit the next 2 stitches, my yarn must be in the back, so I take it between the needles and to the back, so it is ready for me to wrap the needle back there. To purl the next 2 stitches, my yarn must be in front, so I bring it between the needles and to the front before I wrap the yarn. Now I have done 1 row of ribbing, and the pattern will begin to show along here. You can see where you have flat stitches and bumpy stitches. Now reading the pattern again, there is only the 1 row, so I will start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Then the pattern says to purl the next 2 stitches. Bring the yarn to the front and purl the next 2 stitches. Now the next 2 stitches are to be knitted, but if I do not take my yarn to the back before I start to make that knit stitch, you can see how the yarn will go across the needle and make an extra loop on my needle. So that is why I must take the yarn between the needles and to the back before I begin the 2 knit stitches. Now if I start to do a purl stitch without changing my yarn, it will again come across the needle and make an extra stitch. So I have to bring the yarn between the needles and to the front, so it is ready for me to do the 2 purl stitches. It has directions for only 1 row, which is knit 2, purl 2. And you will continue in this pattern until the piece is as long as you want it to be. Now turning the work around again, your pattern shows up a little bit more. You have the row of knit stitches and the bumpy purl stitches. Now on this next row, you can probably notice that you are going to knit into the knit stitches and purl into the purl stitches. So So if this is a flat, smooth stitch, I will knit it. The next one is a flat, smooth stitch, so I will knit it. The next one is a bumpy stitch. It has pearl nubs. So in order to point the needle towards the pearl nubs, I will bring the yarn to the front, and it is ready for me to wrap, making a pearl stitch. Now just looking at the next stitch, I can see it is a knit stitch. So I will take the yarn to the back and make that into a knit stitch. The next one is also knit, so I will knit it. The next stitch is bumpy. It is a purl stitch. So I bring the yarn to the front in order to purl it. The next one is a purl stitch. My yarn is already in front, so I merely purl it. The next one is a knit stitch. I'll take the yarn to the back and knit that stitch. Now, if for some reason I have to stop at this point and lay my work down, I want you to see how I know where I'm going to start the next time. I find the last stitch worked and the yarn is attached to it, and this must go in my right hand. So I find the yarn, it's attached to the last stitch that I have worked. I put that in my right hand and the other stitches in my left hand. And by just looking at the piece of knitting, I can see this is going to be a knit stitch. So I continue on with my pattern. Then looking at it, I can see this is to be a purl stitch. So I bring the yarn to the front and make my last two purl stitches. Turn your work around, and by now the pattern is beginning to show. Continue on working with this piece until you have 3 or 4 inches done before going on to the next segment of tape. I hope your piece of work does not look exactly like this. Right here, I have something that looks very odd. These stitches are twisted, and this is what happens when you put dropped stitches back onto your needle the wrong direction. I'm going to put a safety pin in to this twisted stitch, and then I can take the work off my needles and pull out to that row. It's very easy to pull the work down, but don't go too fast when you get down near the pin. And when you get to the loop where the pin is free on the loop, take it out very slowly to the end of that row, so you do not pull out to the row below. Now as I pull out this last stitch, I'm going to put it back onto my needle, and I will come in from the back to the front underneath the loop and then pull it out. It does not matter whether it is a knit stitch or a purl stitch. I come from the back to the front underneath and then pull the stitch out. From the back to the front underneath and then pull the stitch out. Now I have to take the safety pin out before I do this next stitch, but I come from the back to the front underneath and then pull the stitches out. If you will work slowly and carefully and do it this way, all your stitches will be on your needle the correct direction. Now, if you accidentally pull out this last stitch one row too far, you can merely put it back onto your knitting needle, turn the work around, do the last row, and then turn your work around. And this will be a purl stitch. Now when I turn around, my pattern is correct. I do not have any twisted stitches. Now I'm going to work across this next row, and I'm going to purposely make a mistake. Instead of knitting 2, I'm only going to knit 1. Then, thinking my pattern, I will purl 2, and then knit 2, and then purl 2. And now when I look at my work, my yarn is in the back to knit, but this is not a knit stitch. It should be a purl stitch. Now looking back, I can see where I have made an error. I have been knitting some purl stitches and purling some knit stitches. Now to take this back while it is still on my needle, I will do the opposite of what I did before. I'm going to go from the front to the back in the loop underneath my needle, slip it off, and then pull the stitch out. You go into the loop underneath your needle, slip it off, and then pull it out. And you take one stitch at a time, and this puts them back on to your left-hand needle so they are going the correct direction. The yarn will be coming from the right, going over the needle, and then continuing to the left. Now I am back to where I made the original mistake, and looking at my work, I can see that this next stitch should be knitted. Then I will go on with my pattern and make my 2 purl stitches and my 2 knit stitches and my 2 purl stitches, but I'm accidentally going to drop that stitch off and pull it out a few rows. As you can see, it would be difficult to pick it up on this side because that is a purl stitch. But if I turn this around, I find that is a knit stitch. So using my crochet hook, I'm going to pick this up as I did before, going under each strand and working the stitch back up to my needles. Now I must be sure that this goes on to the needle that I'm going to be working it off of. So looking on the back, here's my yarn. That was my last worked stitch. So this stitch must go on to my right hand needle, and it must go on the correct way. If I open this up, I can see the yarn comes from the right, goes over the needle this way, and then continues to my left. So I'm going to put it on my knitting needle going that direction. The yarn comes from the right, goes over my needle, and continues to the left. Now my yarn is over here in my left hand. If I began going this direction, making this into a knit stitch, which I can see that it is, I will still be going the wrong direction on my knitting. So I must turn this around, have the yarn in my right hand, and the last worked stitch in my right hand. And looking at my work, I can see this will be a purl stitch. The next two are knits, so I will knit them. And the last two are purl, so I will purl them. All my stitches are on the correct way. I have taken out the row that had the crossed stitches, and now I'm ready to bind off my work. Now this will be a little different from what you have done before. You still begin with working the first two stitches, and they are to be knitted. So I will knit the first two stitches. Then I can bind off by picking up the one closest to my right thumb, taking it up, over, and off. Now this next stitch is a purl stitch, and I must work it in the same pattern before binding it off. So I bring the yarn to the front, do a purl stitch. Now I can bind off. Be careful of this thread that is in front of your work. Do not accidentally pick that up when you work the bind off. Come on top of it so that you can bind the stitch off and leave your yarn free. The next stitch is a purl stitch, so I will purl it before binding off. Keep your bind off edge as loose and elastic as the rest of your knitting. This is a knit stitch. I must take the yarn to the back before I knit it and then bind off. The next one is a knit, so I will knit it before binding off. The next stitch is a purl. I must purl it before binding off. The next one is also a purl, so I will purl it before binding off. I will keep each stitch in the established pattern as I bind off. This one is a knit. The next one is a knit. The next one is a purl. Now I have gone too far. Can you see that I'm going to have 3 on my right hand needle instead of 2? So I must take this one back and bind off before I go on. You will never have more than 2 stitches on your right hand needle when you are binding off. Bring the yarn to the front to do my purl stitch, and then bind it off. And I work the last stitch as a purl, and then bind it off. Now you can cut this off as you did before. But if you are still unable to recognize the difference between your knit or your purl stitches, or if you're having any difficulty changing your yarn between the knit and purl stitches, pull this out and practice on this piece again before going on with the tape. This is pattern number 4, front cables. I have already cast on the 12 stitches, and I am ready to do row 1, which will be the same for all uneven numbered rows. And I'll read the pattern as I do it. It begins with a purl 2. Now I must knit 2, but take the yarn to the back first. To purl 4, I must bring the yarn to the front. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. To knit 2, I must take the yarn to the back, and then to purl the last 2, I must bring the yarn to the front. Now when I turn around, I'm going to be on an even numbered row, which will be the right side of my work. I'm going to put in a safety pin so I can see it when I am on this side of my work, but it will not show when I am on the other side. I'm ready now to begin row 2 of my pattern, and it begins with a knit 2. And then I must purl 2, bringing the yarn to the front first, then I knit 4 by taking the yarn to the back. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, then I purl 2, changing my yarn before I start, and change the yarn again when I go to the last knit 2 stitches. Now when I turn around, I do not see the safety pin, so I know I am on the wrong side of my work, which is also an uneven numbered row. Looking back at the pattern, I will repeat row 1, beginning with a purl 2. Now continue working in this pattern until you have finished 5 rows and will be ready to start row 6, which is the cable row. This is how your work should look. The safety pin should be towards you with the wide panel of knit stitches, and you should be ready to do row 6, which is the cable row. It begins with a knit 2, and then a purl 2. Now reading ahead, I find out that my next stitch will be a knit one, so I'm going to take the yarn to the back and drop it, because the pattern tells me to slip 2 stitches to the cable needle, and I'm going to put the tips of these together and take off 2 stitches as if I were purling them. Push them down to the curve of the cable needle and just let them hang in front of your work. Now reading on with the pattern, it tells me to knit 2 stitches. Then it tells me to knit the 2 from the cable needle. But before I do this, I'm going to secure the stitches on my left-hand needle by sliding them away from the tip so I can drop it. Now I will pick up the cable needle, slip the stitches down to the end, making sure I have not twisted them, and I will knit these 2 stitches. Then I can put the cable needle down, push the stitches back to the end of the left-hand needle, and following my pattern, I will purl the next 2 stitches and then knit the last 2 stitches. And you can see the twist of your cable now. Work through your pattern, rows 1 through 5, so you will be ready to turn the cable again. I'm going to show you an easy way to find out if you are indeed ready to begin row 6 again. If you will find the break where your cable turned, this strand of yarn right here was row 6, the row you turned the cable. Then following up, you can count the strands. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is the row that is on your needle. So you are indeed ready to begin row 6. This is your cable row, so you will start with a knit 2. And then a purl 2. And since the next stitch will be a knit, take the yarn to the back and drop it. Using your cable needle again and following the pattern, it tells you to slip the next 2 stitches onto the cable needle and let them hang in front of your work. Now you will knit the next 2 stitches. Before you knit the 2 from the cable needle, secure the stitches on your left-hand needle by pushing them away from the tip. Then you can let that needle hang in back while you push these down to the other end of the cable needle and knit them off. Put down the cable needle, push the stitches back to the tip of the left-hand needle, and continue with your pattern, which is purl 2, and then knit 2. Now you can see where your cable stitches go from your right towards your left when you turn them to the front. Now continue with this pattern until you have turned the cable 4 times. I'm going to show you again how to count your cable rows. Find the break by the side of your cable, and this first strand is the cable row. That was row 6. Now count the strands coming up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is under here. This is 6, which is the row that is on your needles, the cable row. Now binding off on the wrong side is no different than on the right side, but you must keep the pattern. So we will go into the first stitch and make it a purl. The second one is a purl, and then you bind off. Change your yarn, and you will knit the next stitch, and then the next one, and then you will change the yarn again to do your purl stitches, working them in pattern before you bind off. Keep it loose, and be sure you wrap the yarn around the large part of the needle. Now I have done the 4 purl stitches, so I must take the yarn between the needles and to the back to begin on the knit stitches. Then bring it to the front in order to do the purl stitches. Now you can cut this piece off as you did before, and these are how your cables look. Now remember that regardless of whether you bind off on the right or the wrong side, you must keep the pattern. This is pattern number 5, back cables, and you should have no difficulty catching up with me. I have worked the 5 rows, remembering to put in my safety pin, and now I'm ready to work row 6, which is the cable row. Reading the pattern, it says to knit the first 2 stitches. Then I will purl 2, and knowing that the next stitch is a knit stitch, I'm going to bring my yarn to the back and drop it. Because now I'm going to slip 2 onto the cable needle. And this time, I'm going to bring them around in back of my work and let them drop back there while I knit the next 2 stitches. Now be careful that you do not catch this yarn around the cable needle. It must come only around your working needle as you knit the next 2 stitches. Secure the stitches on the left-hand needle by taking them away from the tip, and then you can pick up the cable needle, making sure the stitches are not twisted on it. Push them down to the end, and using that as your knitting needle, you will knit those 2 stitches. Put the cable needle down, push the stitches back to the tip of the left-hand needle, and you're ready to go on with the pattern, which says to purl 2, and then to knit 2. And this cable turns the opposite direction from your front cable. Now work rows 1 through 5 so you are ready to turn the cable again. I have counted my rows so that I know I am on row 6, ready to do the cable again. And following the pattern, I will knit 2, and then purl 2, and bring the yarn to the back and drop it because I know the next stitch will be a knit one. With the cable needle, slip off the 2 stitches and let them drop in back of your work while you knit the next 2 stitches. Now be careful that you do not wrap this yarn around the cable needle. It must come only around your working needle. Secure the stitches on the left-hand needle so that you can pick up the cable needle, making sure you have not twisted the stitches, and slide them down to the tip so that you can knit these 2 stitches off the cable needle. Put that down, slip the stitches back, and going on with the pattern, I will purl 2, and then knit 2. Now when I turn around, I'm going to show you how to fasten in a new skein of yarn. Try to do this at the end of a row or the beginning of a row. And I'm going to just cut the yarn and start my new row and make 1 stitch with the new yarn by just holding it under my thumb while I make the stitch. Now lay the work down and tie the 2 ends into a square knot up snugly under the needles. Being on the edge, these can be worked into your seam and will not show. And you can go on with your row. Now continue with this pattern until you have turned the cable 4 times. Remember, you are doing row 1. Now you can see the complete pattern, how the cables go from the left to the right when they are turned on the back side. Now I'd like to show you how to slip your work off of your knitting needle onto a stitch holder. Put the tips together and slip off each stitch as if you were going to purl it. If you do it this way, they will be on the stitch holder going the same direction they are on your needle. You must be careful that you do not splice into the yarn, pick up the entire stitch, and be careful on the purl stitches that you don't get down into the loop underneath. Get just the stitch that is on your needle. When they have been slipped off, you fasten the stitch holder, and now your work is secure until you are ready to use it again. Now when you take them back, you do exactly the same thing. Put the tips together and take them off as if you were purling them. Your stitch holder acts as a temporary needle whenever it is necessary to take your stitches off your regular needle for any reason. This is often done at the back of the neck when ribbing is going to be picked up for your finished edge. Now that they're back on your knitting needle, you can bind this piece off, working the stitches in pattern as you did on the front cable. Pattern number 6 is for moss or seed stitch. If you will read the pattern, it says to cast on 11 stitches, which you should be able to do fairly quickly now. There is only one row, knit 1, purl 1, ending with a knit 1. So we will do this across the row, and remember, you have to change your yarn for every stitch. If you get lost in the middle of the row, you can either count your stitches or look at the previous stitch to see if the purl nub is in the front or in the back. When you've completed the first row, turn around and notice that you must repeat this same row. You're going to start with a knit 1, but you will be doing this into what looks like and is a purl stitch on the row below. In this pattern stitch, you will always be knitting into a purl stitch and purling into a knit stitch. So just start in with a knit 1, change your yarn, and then make your purl 1, change your yarn, and make a knit 1. Remember, you are purling into knit stitches and knitting into purl stitches. This distinctive pattern is usually worked over an odd number of stitches. Just follow your pattern slowly for 3 or 4 inches, then I will show you how to bind it off. Remember, you must bind off all pattern stitches, keeping the same pattern you have been working with. And in this stitch, you have been knitting into purl stitches and purling into knit stitches. So you must do this before you bind it off. This first stitch is a purl stitch underneath, so I will knit it. And then change my yarn to do a purl stitch. And then I will bind off. Now my next stitch must be knitted, so I take the yarn to the back, make my knit stitch, and then bind off. My next stitch will be a purl stitch, so I bring the yarn to the front and purl it before binding off. The next one is going to be a knit stitch, so I will knit it before binding off. The next one is a purl stitch, and keeping my pattern, I must knit into this next purl stitch before binding it off, and then I must purl into the next knit stitch before binding it off. The next is a knit stitch. The next one is a purl stitch. And the last one is a knit stitch. Now you can see the very distinctive pattern of your moss stitch or your seed stitch. This next pattern, number 7, is quite long and somewhat complicated, so I'm going to do it in short increments. An easy way to know where you are is to use the row counter. Slip it on the end of your needles and turn the dial after every row. Now I am on row 5, so that is where my counter is set. And if you read this row on your pattern, you will notice that a star or an asterisk is at the beginning of the row. Ignore this symbol the first time you come to it, because later on the pattern will tell you to go back to that symbol. So row 5 reads, to knit 2. And then I must knit 2 together. So I simply go into 2 stitches at the same time, wrap my yarn, pull it through, and slip them off. Now I have done this one time, and my pattern tells me now to go back to the star. So I go back to the knit 2, and then work the knit 2 together. Now I'm not across the row yet, so I must go back to the star again and begin with my knit 2, and then do the knit 2 together. You have decreased 3 times, so from the original 12, you should now have 9. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 stitches. Now work rows 6 through 8 in stockinette stitch, and remember to turn your row counter as you work. This is row 9 of your pattern. Again, there is a star or an asterisk on this row, and remember that you ignore this symbol the first time you come to it. Then you will go back to the star when the pattern tells you to do so. This row starts again with a knit 2. And now I must increase in the next stitch. To do this, I'm going to roll the work forward so that I can see the purl nub underneath the next stitch. And I will go into that purl nub, wrap my yarn, make a stitch through it, which is the increase, and then I must knit the stitch itself. Now the pattern tells me to go back to the star, so I will knit 2 and then increase in the next stitch by rolling the work forward so that I can see the purl nub underneath the next stitch. I make my increase there, and then I must knit the stitch. I have not completed the row, so I go back to the star, knit 2, roll my work forward so that I can pick up the purl nub underneath that last stitch, make my increase, and then knit the stitch. I have made 3 increases, so I should be back to my 12 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Now work rows 10 through 12 in stockinette stitch. Your piece of knitting should now look something like an hourglass, where you decreased down to 9 stitches, then increased back to 12 stitches. The increases and decreases are almost invisible, but you can pick them out if you know exactly what to look for. Here is your increase where 1 stitch has become 2, and down here you can see the decrease where 2 stitches have become 1. Now row 13 again starts with a star. I will knit 2, then the pattern says to slip 1. You always slip as if to purl unless the pattern says otherwise. So I will slip the next stitch from one needle to the other without working it and without using my yarn. The pattern then says to knit 1 stitch. So I will knit the stitch. Then you come to the letters PSSO, which stands for pass, slipped, stitch, over. Here is my slipped stitch. So I will pick that up, pass it over the knitted stitch, and off the end of both needles. Now my pattern tells me to repeat again from the star, so I will knit 2, slip 1, knit 1, and pass the slipped stitch over. It is just like binding off. I'm not across the row yet, so I must go back to the star and do the knit 2, slip 1, knit 1, and pass the slipped stitch over. Now work rows 14 through 16 in stockinette stitch, and don't forget your row count. As you can see, the slip, knit, and pass decrease shows up more than the knit 2 together, and it is used more often in pattern stitches than when you want to merely decrease or increase in order to shape your piece of knitting. Now row 17 begins with another symbol used in patterns, the parentheses. Whatever is inside of these symbols is a unit and should not be separated. It will always tell you after the parentheses how many times to repeat what is inside. And in this case, it tells to repeat 3 times. So we begin with our knit 2, and then a yarn over. To do this, bring the yarn between the needles and to the front. And as you do the next stitch, you can see where the yarn will go over the needle and make an extra stitch. Now I have done what was in the parentheses 1 time, so I must do it again with my knit 2 and then the yarn over. That is the second time I have done it. This will be the 3rd time I have done what was in the parentheses. There is my yarn over. Now completing that part of the pattern, I can go on, and it tells me now to knit the last 3 stitches. Now when I turn around to come back, you will pick up these yarn overs as a regular stitch. And when you come to them, you will see they are like a large hole in your work. There is the yarn over. And you must go in there and make a regular stitch. This was the knit 2, which now become a purl 2 on the stockinette side. And there is the next yarn over. They are used to give the appearance of an open or lacy pattern stitch. And there is the yarn over. Now going on with your pattern, you are doing stockinette stitch of rows 18 through 21, and you have already done row 18. Now notice that you will end with a knit row ready to begin a purl row, so don't forget to move your counter. Your row counter should be set at row 22, and you should be ready to start a purl row. Increasing and decreasing is seldom done on the purl side, but you should know how to do it. And by now you should be familiar with the stars, so we start row 22 with a purl 2. Now it says to purl 2 together, so you must go into 2 stitches at the same time. To make this a little easier, if you use the thumb and first finger of the left hand and pull down on your work, you can open that second stitch, so it's easy to get your needle into it as you purl 2 together. Now going back to the star again, purl 2, and then purl 2 together. Now just pull down a little, and you can easily get in to both stitches at the same time. Going back to the star again, I will purl 2, and then pull down so that I can get in to the 2 stitches at the same time. Now count your stitches, and don't forget to change your row counter as you do the next 3 rows in stockinette stitch. You should be ready to do row 26 of your pattern, and it begins with a purl 2. And then you will increase in the next stitch. Now the pearl nub is already here for you to use, but in order to go into it the correct way, you must pick it up with the needle in the right hand, turn it around, and put it on your left hand needle so it is open. Then when you make the increase, it will not be a twisted stitch. That was the increase, and now I must purl the stitch itself. Going back to the star again, I purl 2, and then pick up this pearl nub with the tip of my right hand needle, pull it up, and put it onto the left hand needle this way so that I can make the stitch into it and it will not be twisted. That was the increase stitch, and now this is the stitch itself. I'm not across the row yet, so I must go back to the star again. And I will purl 2, and pick up the pearl nub, which is right here, turn it around when I put it onto my left hand needle, purl into the increase, and then work the stitch itself. Count your stitches so you be sure you have the right number, and you will work the next 3 rows in stockinette. You should be on row 30, and you should have 12 stitches at the beginning of this row. It starts with an asterisk again, which we will ignore, and begin with the purl 2. Then it says to slip 1, and we slip as if we were going to purl, but do not use the yarn. You slip 1 stitch, then purl 1 stitch, and you come to the symbol PSSO, which means pass slipped stitch over. Now you must be careful that you do not get underneath your yarn. You must pick up the slip stitch, which is here, and pass it over the tip of your needles and off. Now going back to the star again, it will purl 2, slip 1, purl 1, and pass the slipped stitch over, which is this stitch right here, and it comes up, over, and off, just like binding off a purl stitch. Now to finish the row, you must go back to the star again and purl 2, slip 1, purl 1, and pass the slipped stitch over. Now be sure you remember to change your row counter and work rows 31 through 33 in stockinette stitch. You are now on row 34, a purl row. This one starts with a group of stitches in parentheses again. And remember, they are a unit that cannot be separated, and after the parentheses, it will tell you what to do with them. So we begin with our purl 2, and then make a yarn over. Since your yarn is already in front on the purl row, to make a yarn over, you must wrap it around your needle and bring it to the front again. Now you have repeated what's in the parentheses 1 time, so you do it again with a purl 2 and a yarn over, which means wrap the yarn completely around the needle and bring it to the front. You have to repeat this one more time. Purl, 2, and then yarn over. You have done this 3 times, so you can go on with the pattern, and it tells you to purl the next 3 stitches. Now when you turn around and do the next row, you will come to yarn overs again, which are like big holes in your work, and you must make a stitch into each one of them. Here is your yarn over. So you will make a knit stitch into it. Then you have the 2 stitches that were the purls, and you come to another yarn over, and you must make a stitch into this yarn over. You have 2 more stitches, and then another yarn over, so you make a stitch into it, and then you can finish the row. Now looking at the work on this side, you can see that there is no difference in the yarn overs between the knit and the purl side. There is no difference in the increasing and decreasing except for the part where you knit, slip and pass, or purl, slip and pass. The purl stitches slant from the left to the right, and down here you will notice that the knit stitches slant from the right to the left. Now I'm going to show you how to measure your work. So lay it flat on a firm surface, and then using your tape measure, put the end of the tape measure right up under your needles and pull down. And as you do this, you can see that this piece is 8 1/4 inches long. Now finish the last 2 rows of your pattern and bind off before going on. This will be pattern number 8, and you will need your stitch marker for this one. My 12 stitches are cast on, so I begin with row 1, which starts with a knit 2. Yarn over, slip 1, knit 1, and then pass the slip stitch over. Now you must be careful to get the slip stitch and not the yarn over. This is the one you want right here, and it comes up, over, and off. Then you have a knit 2, and you're going to place the marker on the right hand needle. This goes between your stitches to mark your pattern. Now going on, it says to knit 2, knit 2 together, yarn over, and knit 2. Now I have increased and decreased on each side of my marker. So I have 6 stitches on this side and 6 stitches on this side. Every row will have the same number of stitches. Now row 2 and all even rows are merely a purl row. So you will purl back. Remember to pick up your yarn overs as a regular stitch, and when you get to the stitch marker, you simply slip it from one needle to the other. You will have a yarn over on this purl side, on this side of your marker too, so pick that up as a regular stitch. Now row 3 begins with a knit 3. Then a yarn over, slip 1, knit 1, and pass the slip stitch over. Now be sure you don't get back here and get the yarn over. You must get the slipped stitch to pass over. Then your pattern says to knit 1, slip the marker. It just goes from one needle to the other. Then you have a knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, and you end with knit 3. Now row 4 is an even numbered row, so you will purl it just as you did row 2. Remembering to pick up your yarn overs and to slip your marker and now you are ready to do row 5 of your pattern. This begins with a knit 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, slip 1, knit 1, and pass the slip stitch over. Be careful of this again, that you do get the slipped stitch. Slip your marker, knit 2 together, yarn over, and knit 4. Now row 6, like all even rows, will be a purl row. Just watch out for your yarn overs and make sure you have 6 stitches before the marker and 6 stitches after the marker. Whoops, that slipped off, so I'll do it again. Now this is how your pattern should look. Work this pattern through several times so you become familiar with it and how to slip the marker. This is how your pattern should look. If you will notice, the knit 2 together slants from the left to the right, and the slip, knit, and pass slants from the right to the left. And this is what makes your distinctive pattern stitches. Now, if you need more practice on this pattern stitch, keep going before you bind it off. I would like to show you how to read some typical patterns. There will always be a picture of the garment, and one of the most important things for you to be aware of is the difference in how the sizes may be given. This one gives the measurements as a finished measurement, 33 with 35 and 37 inches inside the parentheses. This pattern gives a finished measurement which is approximately 1 inch larger than the numbers that are given up here. The man's sweater gives you the measurement around the chest, but the finished measurement is about 2 inches larger. So be sure you read this before you begin the pattern so that you are sure you are making the correct size. The amount of yarn needed for each pattern is always given in the same sequence. The first amount outside of the parentheses will be the smallest size. Inside the parentheses would be the medium and then the large size. And this pattern gives you a substitution where you can use other yarns and get the same pattern. This one gives you the same thing. This would be your first size, your second size, and your third size. And this gives you substitutions for different yarns, but it also will change the needle size. Now the third pattern does not give you any substitutions of yarn. It just gives you one kind of yarn to use for the pattern, but the sequence is the same. This is the small size, this is the medium, and then the large size. This pattern calls for size 6 and 9 needles, or whatever size is necessary to obtain your gauge. It also calls for a number 6 circular needle, 16 inches long. The gauge for this pattern is 4 stitches equals 1 inch in stockinette stitch on the larger needles. Now this pattern calls for needles 5 and 7, or whatever size is necessary to obtain your gauge. There are 6 stitches and 8 rows to 1 inch, worked in stockinette stitch on size 7 needles. Now this last pattern calls for size 9 and 10.5 needles, or whatever size is necessary to obtain your gauge. And it gives the gauge in stockinette stitch as 5 rows to 1 inch and 3 stitches to 1 inch. Now I want to come back to this phrase, or whatever size is necessary to obtain your gauge. If you do not get the correct gauge, your garment will not come out the correct size. So these needle sizes are a good place to start. But if you do not get the gauge on those needles, you must change the size of needles until you do get the correct gauge. Now I'd like to show you how to count your own stitch gauge. I have made a swatch using the same yarn and needles I was using in the tape. And I'm going to count in the middle of this swatch at least 2 inches worth of stitches. So I have my stitch gauge laid on my work, and now I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches to the 2 inches. To get your row gauge, turn this around the other direction, and then you may count your rows. And be sure you count for 2 full inches in either direction. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows to 2 inches. If you have too few stitches in 1 inch, try a smaller needle. If you have too many stitches in 1 inch, try a larger needle. You must get the correct gauge before starting to knit, or the garment will not come out to be the correct size. I hope you have enjoyed this one-on-one way to learn basic knitting. Since you are now familiar with the stitches and know how to read a pattern, decide what you want to make and begin knitting so that you can use the information and skills you have acquired. It won't be long before you too will have knitting fever. Thanks for letting me help you watch and learn.